It's time to get thracked.
Between 1984 and when's the next one?
This one's 95, but the band came back in 94.
So 10 years.
Yeah, Robert had the seed to bring Crimson back as far back as like 91, I think, or 90. But the way to do it came a little later.
But I think he was battling with EG.
Yeah, the main thing was the lawsuit with EG.
Yeah.
They kind of went the South way. We don't get into details, but
that had the unintended consequence, I think, of him starting to reach out to these musicians that he used to play with, and that they were starting to become sympathetic toward one another again and on good terms. And I think that the unintended consequence of this epic legal battle with EG Records was that King Crimson were talking again, and there was interest in a new group.
And Robert had the idea to do something of I forget exactly what the germ was to this idea, but they decided to do like a double duo format. I'm sorry, the double trio format. Double trio. So 2 guitars, 2 basses, and 2 drums. And that's the band, a 6-piece, a sextet. Yeah. So the band, which, is Robert Fripp, of course, Adrian Belew on the other guitar. You got Tony Levin on bass and Chapman Stick, and you got Trey Gunn on a war guitar, which is like a bass, and a Chapman Stick had like a baby. It's a really diverse and new instrument. It's very cool. And then you get Bill Bruford and Pat Mesolato on the drums. The band got together in 94. I think they started doing rehearsals first, and then King Crimson returned to the earth again in Argentina in 1994 with a first series of concerts there and a EP released called Vroom. And then from there, they went to record a proper album, which is called Thrak. And Thrak is the sound of 100 guitars going at once. It's a thrack. The really nice industrial album cover also.
Yeah.
It fits the music quite well, I think, also. Thrak was one that, funnily enough, was a real favorite. Again, another one that was a real favorite of mine, but funnily enough, plummeted down the rankings this time.
Same here. Yeah.
I was probably the biggest surprise for me was how much I was not vibing with the Thrak this time.
Disappointment.
I was
that's how I felt. Disappointment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. It just seems less. There's less of an energy going on here. And there's something about the sound of this record that's really bothering me this time. I'm not quite sure what it is. I don't know if it's the Jocko Joxic mix or not, because I know this mix is real different from the original mix.
It is. Yeah.
Like this one is way more open and spacious. You can hear all the parts, but the original mix had a lot more energy and power to it. Like it's heavier.
Guitars. Yeah.
The guitars were way forward. Yeah.
Yep. And that makes it a different record to me. And it's almost like the drums have, because the 80s King Crimson, especially Discipline, was all about, the interlocking guitar parts. And this album, at least from the Jocko Joxic mix, I was hearing more interlocking drums as being the forefront. And I kind of got to the point where it's like, I've heard enough drums.
Yeah. I think I had the same thing, and I'm a drum person. But I think the interlocking drum parts like that work better in the most recent King Crimson. I'm wondering if it's because of Gavin Harrison's influence. It's like the Bruford and Mesolato based a lot of their drum interlocking parts on this stuff on a book that Gavin Harrison wrote about drummers playing together. And then Gavin joined the band later. So
I didn't know that.
3 drummers. Yeah. So the 3 drummers having the mastermind in the band, I think, helps elevate the material. Like the drum parts in the triple drummer Crimson are really incredible. That is some far advanced playing.
Yeah.
I don't think I love Bill Bruford, right? But I don't think this quite has that energy, except maybe on stage, because this is another Crimson record.
That's a different matter. Yeah.
Yeah. This is another Crimson record that does not capture the power that this band has. The double trio King Crimson was freaking amazing live. They were ferocious on stage. Like if you look at almost any live recording, you get a completely different group. Like you get some of the same songs, but they are like to the nth degree of better than this album has shown. Which is kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
There's a couple of great songs on here, like Vroom and Dakota and Dinosaur are a great way to open an album.
Dinosaur's great. Yeah.
Dinosaur is great. I love People, and I love Sex, Sleep, Eat, Drink, Dream, which might be the best song on the record, quite honestly. They like the whole like twisting into this like crazy improv in the middle of the song and kind of going into this other world of sound. That's amazing.
It's almost Happy Family.
Yeah, like, it is.
I had the same experience where I remembered liking this album a lot more than I did. And I think that this album is fine on its own. It's really enjoyable on its own if you don't compare it to other King Crimson records. But
yes,
the very nature of this video that we talked about was comparison, was ranking. And it's when I started comparing it to other King Crimson records that I started feeling it very much lacking. I find the best material is at the beginning and the end. Not the very end, but the Vroom, Coda Marine 475, Dinosaur, Walking on Air, all great tracks. I enjoy Beabout. I enjoy Thrak. The middle of the record starts to lose me a little bit. The Inner Garden stuff, it's fine, but it gets a little repetitive, with these Inner Garden 1, Inner Garden 2, Radio 1, Radio 2. People is kind of cool. I enjoy the kind of, it's almost like a funky neurotica or something like that.
Yeah.
Busy streets, life on the streets kind of stuff.
Like, I think it's like a mix of like neurotica and the Beatles. Like it's a good pop song, but with that like neurotica, like urgency and menace.
There's
lurking under the thing.
There's a ton of Beatles influence on this.
Yeah, this is like the poppiest King Crimson album, which is weird to say. This is the one.
Adrian sounds like John Lennon a lot. A lot of his vocals remind me of John Lennon, especially Sex, Sleep, Eat, Drink, Dream. That sounds like, that sounds like Beatles in the 90s to me. If the Beatles had been alive and producing music.
I think it's because like around this time they were releasing all of those like archival Beatles recordings. And I think like they play on either this tour or the next tour, Adrian would encore with Free as a Bird. Which I think is a John Lennon song. Like that leads me to believe he's listening to this stuff, and it's all over this music.
Well, I think that also the 90s were kind of the first time that it was the first time that a generation of musicians had come up and started making music that were influenced by the 60s. The 80s were all about getting away from the 60s. Let's not even talk about the Beatles or Beach Boys or any of this stuff. But with like the grunge bands are referencing the Beatles, Smashing Pumpkins are playing Mellotrons again, and quoting Black Sabbath as their favorite band. And I mean, even at this time, you have Nirvana. Kurt Cobain is saying that Red is one of his favorite records of all time. So I feel like this is a very retro King Crimson album. And I would say that because of that, it's one of the ones that sounds the most dated to me when I listen to it now.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think I need to reiterate that I don't think this is a poor album. I just think it's not as good as other King Crimson records. And I do think that Dinosaur is a great track. And it's every bit as memorable to me as something like Elephant Talk. Yeah. And also I enjoy hearing the Mellotron come back.
In the studio, it's the same Mellotron from In the Court of the Crimson King.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
That's cool. There's a picture of it in the booklet. It's very cool. It's the court Mellotron.
Yeah.
Which is dope. But yeah, it's also has that problem. Like I have the same opinion you do about this album. But I will say part of it is like it has that 1990s album flow problem. Like
that's the other thing.
In the 90s, yeah, it's long. It's too long. The 90s had a problem with that because with the advent of the CD, now you can have, instead of having, an album that's be like 40 minutes, you can have an album be an hour or an hour and 10 minutes.
80,
and everyone
80 minutes.
was 80 minutes. Everyone and their mother was making albums that were like so bloated and so long. I don't think this is too bloated, but it definitely could be trimmed, and I think would probably be stronger if it was trimmed. Yeah. But yeah, it's like Ian said, it's a good record. It's just when compared to everything else in the catalog, just about everything else, it's kind of lacking compared to the excellence that's in the Crimson catalog.
And I would choose, as an experience, I think I would choose the Deja Vroom DVD over Thrak.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a better representation.
Yeah, that one or the Vroom Vroom double CD, which I love the pieces, because that Mexico City show is really electric. Like the Deja Vroom performance is, off the walls stuff. It's great.
So we're going to talk about the construction of light.
Yes. So the King Crimson did something very interesting after this album. And I have the box set for this
that's
era.
Cool.
Yeah, this is the Heaven and Earth box set, which is kind of interesting because it's really interesting actually, because what it does is it combines everything post Thrak up until 2008 into a single package, which is nuts because the Blu-ray discs on this set have every single performance that the ProjeKcts did. They're all here. It's crazy.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So what about the ProjeKcts? Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So Crimson did something that I think is really unique. That as a creative outlet, they were trying to do something different, right? There was kind of like a stagnation happening, I guess, with the stuff after the double trio finished touring. So instead of like Crimson stopping or trying to rehearse in the studio as a unit, King Crimson decided to split itself and workshop different parts of itself to do different things and try out new material together, but with different members of the same group. And they call this ProjeKcts with a capital KC, like it's crimsonized writing. And so like the different members would split. So it's not like 2 guitars, 2 basses, 2 drums. Sometimes it's 2 guitars and a drummer. Sometimes it's 2 drummers, guitar, bass. Sometimes it's 2 bass players and a drummer. It's all different. And there were 4. Technically, there were like 6, I think. But during this time period, there were 4. Project 2 came out first, which is weird because it was conceived second. And Project 2 is Adrian Belew, Robert Fripp, and Trey Gunn. And on that one, Adrian Belew plays Roland V drums. This is where electronic drums enter into the Crimson canon. The next was Project 1, which is Bill Bruford, Robert Fripp, Trey Gunn, and Tony Levin. And this is Bill Bruford's last thing with Crimson. Project 1 played 1 single concert, and it was a completely improvised show at a jazz cafe in London, which is really cool. They really wanted to maximize the improvisation bit. So what they did was, even in the sound check, they played sound check in isolation so that no one else heard each other or saw each other until going on stage that night. It's very cool. It's a very interesting recording. And then there was Project 4, which is Tony Levin, Pat Mastelotto, Trey Gunn, and Fripp, which is essentially like Crimson with 2 bass players. And then Project 3, which was Pat Mastelotto, Trey Gunn, and Robert Fripp, which probably leans closest to what comes next. It's a very interesting time period. There's a lot of improvisation, a lot of new material that's either workshopped into something you'll hear later or something that is kind of just, thrown away with. I think it's very interesting to hear these things and then hear the next 2 albums because they do really serve as kind of a capstone. They don't last forever, the projects. They go until about 99, on and off, really. Then there's like other projects that happen while the next album comes out or after that. But they eventually, Tony Levin leaves for some other obligation, and then they record the next album, which is The Construction of Light. There are 2 versions of this album now. There's the original recording with all electronic drums, and then there's the Reconstruction of Light, which is in this box set, which Pat Mastelotto went and re-recorded all the drums. And I think also there's a little bit of extra music on the album as well, like little interludes between the Frying Pan and something else. I almost view them as different albums. I think the original Construction of Light is probably my least favorite Crimson album, but the Reconstruction of Light is much better.
It is. Yeah, it is much better.
Yeah, the drum sound on the original album sucks. It's really thin. Pat Mastelotto notoriously hated it when it was coming out, and the material they were writing they all liked, but it's the album was a disappointment for a lot of them for the sound. But this is another example of, and maybe the best example of a King Crimson album where the live material that came after that was far superior. This band rocks. They call this the double duo because it was after the double trio. But the tours that they went on after this album came out are really amazing and very improvisational heavy. It's a really ferocious band, and it's kind of sort of not captured on this album also, but kind of in some ways it is, because this is a really heavy and intense record. This might be the most like instrumentally dense King Crimson album, is the Construction of Light.
Yeah, I did a review on this when I got it, and
excuse me.
A lot of my thoughts can be found on that video, so I don't know how much I want to reiterate.
We don't have to rehash too much. Yeah.
I think the Construction of Light, the title track, is far and away the best thing on it. I enjoy Fractured. I enjoy Lark's Tongues and Aspic. I just think that this one doesn't quite get the balance right for me between the accessible side and the more elaborate side. And this might have something to do with the fact that they didn't perform this music live. It was written in the studio.
Yeah, I think so.
It has that composition first way of thinking. Because some of this is like so complex it just kind of loses me. And then other times I can really dig in and enjoy it in a classic King Crimson way. It's uneven. I like the inclusion of the ProjeKcts track, Heaven and Earth. Some of the stuff doesn't work as well. I get a kick out of Prozac Blues. It kind of makes me smile. But I think you've said that Into the Frying Pan and The World's My Oyster Soup Kitchen Floor Wax Museum are two of the most forgettable King Crimson tracks.
Yeah, I hate Oyster Soup. That song stinks.
I don't feel that strongly about it, but this is pretty much near the bottom of the pile for me. Also, I agree that ReconstruKction is better than Construction. But
oh yeah, I agree. I think Heaven and Earth and the title track are probably the best things on the album. I really like Lark's 4, but the problem with this record is it's so in your face and it's so intense and heavy, and there's rarely a break, even though like pop tunes are either like not good enough to warrant a good break, or they don't really change the timbre too much either. It's just
there's no ballad.
There's no ballad. It's an assault, really. I like Prozac Blues a lot also. I think this album works best to like listen to it in chunks. Like do the first couple tunes, do something else for a while, come back to it, and like, wow, Fractured's incredible, and then go and have dinner, come back, and then listen to Lark's 4 and be blown away, and then listen to Heaven and Earth and then walk away.
It might work better on vinyl.
Yeah.
If you listen to one side at a time, it might work better.
It might work better on vinyl.
So you have the box set. Tell us about Power to Believe.
Yeah. So the double duo, as I mentioned before, went on tour extensively after Construction of Light and really honed themselves as a ferocious live outfit. I mean, their live recordings on here are ridiculous. But they continued to tour and write new material, and they started germinating seeds for another album. And so they did. So they went in the studio with another producer this time, the first time I think since
Discipline.
Repair, or since Discipline. And they used a guy named Machine, who's like a modern producer, and they made the Power to Believe. Some of the material was played live before the album was recorded, so it has a little bit of an edge with honing the material beforehand, most notably Level 5, and I think Electric also was performed live a bunch. And they tried to record what I think maybe the best two they did live, The Deception of the Thrush. But they couldn't get the rights to use T.S. Eliot's voice, which is a sample in the beginning of the tune that Trey Gunn plays. And they just never really worked out a version, because part of that piece, especially towards the end, it's really, really serene and beautiful, and it kind of gets quiet. And part of the draw of that is to see how quiet they can get with the audience. I mean, there's recordings where it's like almost mute. There's almost no sound. They felt like they couldn't replicate that in the studio, which I think is fair. I miss it, but I think it's fair. And they make the Power to Believe, which quite honestly is one of the best Crimson records. I think it's the last King Crimson album, and I think it works tremendously as a capstone to an amazing career of albums. It's got everything they do right. Plus, it also has its own thing going on, and it's pushing the envelope in a new way, like Crimson always does. It's really, really tremendous. I listened to this album 2 days ago, and I really loved it more than I think ever, honestly. It ages tremendously. Also, it sounds like
It does.
Nothing that came out around this time. It sounds so like head and shoulders above everything else around in 2003. Like it's a really kind of a special album, honestly.
I think it is
really
too.
think it is.
And
Yeah.
Of this final 3 albums, I think it's my favorite.
Yeah, me too.
Far. It's my favorite post 3 of A Perfect Pair. I've always liked it. It was actually one of the first King Crimson records I heard. I think I heard Court of the Crimson King and Red and maybe this one.
Me too, actually.
Kind of in that order. Is that right?
Roughly, yeah. I think my
really
first one might have been Thrak or Lark's Tongues, and then it was Red and Power to Believe.
I think Level 5 is one of the all-time classic King Crimson compositions.
Yeah.
It's also connected to the Lark's Tongues series, which is cool. And I got a chance to see this live with Pat and Trey. And it was really an experience. It was an incredible experience to see this. I love Eyes Wide Open. It's the kind of pop song that I think has been missing from the last couple of records. It takes me back to Waiting Man.
Yeah.
In a way, it's just kind of Adrian's beautiful lyrical simplicity. Electric is a fun ride with a lot of, peaks and valleys.
I love that tune.
A bit like classic King Crimson. Facts of Life is, I think, what songs like Oyster Soup tried to be, but this works so much better for me. The Power to Believe 2 is great with the gamelan influences coming back, and it's again merging the eras. You can hear callbacks to the 80s in this album. You can hear callbacks to the 70s Crimson, but it also very much looks forward. It's very much pushing the envelope once again. Dangerous Curves is a track that it's almost like
Talking Drum.
Talking Drum. It's Talking Drum again. It even has the dissonant ending.
Yeah.
The jump scare ending. Happy with what you have to be happy with. That's a track that runs through my head a lot. It's maybe doesn't quite fit with the album for me. There's something that, maybe it worked better as the EP track, but I still really like it. I like it in isolation. My issue with this album is that it feels like it's lacking a ending. And I think that it's that deception of the thrush problem. They had attempted to record it in the studio, but couldn't because, as you said, the dynamic issue. But, this is the band that released Starless and Bible Black. I mean, it's not the band, but it's the same band name. So why not just do a live version? Throw a live version on that's well recorded, that they like the performance of. Take it back and spruce it up in the studio a little bit if need be. But I think it could have been worthwhile to put a live version, even as an extra track. And there is a live version that's an extra track on the new version, so it's nice to have it there. But I think it could have been part of the original album. So that's what keeps this album from being like a 10 out of 10 for me, is that it feels like it's less well-rounded as it could be. But it's definitely the strongest latter period King Crimson record, and it's one that I have a lot of fondness for. And I feel like if King Crimson never make another record, which looks like it's likely to be the case, yeah, they're not going to, then this is fine. I'm fine with this as an ending. It's a record that was made 20 years ago, but just like Discipline, it sounds like it could have been made yesterday or even tomorrow. So I mean, just aside from one song that I feel like should have been on the record, I have nothing but praise for this recording. And it brings back the peace melody idea from Wake Up Beside. It brings back, but now it's the Power to Believe motif.
I love that. Yeah.
Again, we're bringing all the eras together. It's like Red. It's like Three of a Perfect Pair. It's just kind of tying all the loose ends together. And I think this album may do that more successfully than those other two records. As much as I love them, this really does feel like, period, the end, on to the next thing kind of statement. And there's this feeling like if they made another one and it wasn't quite as good, it would be a huge disappointment. So I'm happy that this is the final King Crimson record.
That was very well said. I agree with you 100%. It is like really is the perfect capstone to the whole career. I have nothing but praise for this album too. I do think you make a really good point that this should be Deception of the Thrush live on the bottom. But I kind of like the fade out ending. It's kind of nice. It is very anticlimactic and the weakest part of the album, but it's very small weakness, I think, compared to the rest of the album, which is so darn great.
Yeah.
It's a real treat to listen to. I was really enthralled this time with doing with Power to Believe 2. That whole middle part of the album is just really special. The gamelan coming back and all of the electronic sounds that are they are far better than the last album. Like everything that's electronic here is married really well with acoustic stuff. It sounds organic. It sounds just full of life. The production's great. It really enhances all of this material. Yeah. It's great. You can't really beat Level 5 either. That's, like you said, the quintessential King Crimson.